Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to do a draft. I will do a draft and I will upload it. But I just wanted to get in some quick commentary on the set. I have mentioned a few times that I don't like the set during drafting it or playing sealed, and I just wanted to be clear. I'm not trying to get anyone to attack designers or, I think they do good work and they have a hard job releasing as many sets as they are every year. And maybe that's a bad decision. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe they'll figure out how to settle in to designing sets this quickly. That's, up to them and their process or whatever. But I did want to be clear about why I think that this is actually a bad set. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. And I think I figured out after doing some researching and filtering through some more of the sensational stuff, I think I figured out some points of contention for other people as well as myself. And so, yeah, let's just jump into it. The things I'm going to cover are the name of the set, the complexity of the set as it relates to some of the design goals that the team at Wizards has expressed in the past. Specifically, what I'm going to compare and contrast with is Mark Rosewater's concept of lenticular design. We'll look at the story, we'll look at the aesthetic, and then we'll wrap it all up. All right, so to start out with, the name. The name Murders at Markov Manor. I mean, first of all, it's just hard to say, and I'm not sure a lot of people even remember the it's Karlov Manor. It's not even Markov Manor. So, I think it would have been. I don't know. I don't know what it should have been named, but that name doesn't seem to be quite appropriate. I don't think we want to say murder all the time. Also, is another thing. It's a little weird to every time you mention it. So we say the names of a Magic set way more than the title of a video game, for instance. And so maybe just calling it Markov or Karlov Manor or something a little bit simpler, Mystery at the Manor. So, something like that, that could have been better. All right, so that's it. That's all I'm going to say about the name. Don't really want to say murder all the time. The name is complex, hard to remember. Karlov Manor, not Markov Manor. Anyway. Moving on. So the next point I wanted to make was the complexity as it relates to Mark Rosewater's lenticular design. All right, so I just want to touch on the lenticular design thing, and I have the article up here. Let me grab that real quick. The main thing I want to talk about is board complexity. But the main quote from this article that was written on March 31st, 2014, I realized that was a while ago. Goals may have changed, but I did think that the idea of lenticular design was quite good, clever, intelligent, and helped make a lot of sense out of Magic and its design and the design goals. So retention of your current audience is crucial, but also, we want to be able to be kind and attractive to new and returning players. According to Mark Rosewater. Mark Rosewater goes on to say that the complexity is common because beginning players on average buy fewer boosters, and thus a great percentage of cards or of the game pieces that they interact with that are relevant to them are at common. By making the threshold for complexity, Mark goes on to say, at common lower, we were simplifying the game for beginners and thus lowering the barrier to entry while still keeping the more advanced cards in the game. So the idea of lenticular design is that in this article, Mark goes on to explain that an individual card does not have the same complexity to everyone. There are hidden complexities, and there are complexities that are at the surface. And that there's an importance in a card being flexible to the advanced player, but easy to use for the beginning player. Key here in the points that I'm about to make are that cards be understandable and easy to use for the beginning player. All right, so switching back to my notes, the first point I want to make is reading the card explains the card is a thing that commonly gets said. Now this is not necessarily said by Rosewater or any of the Forsyth or any of the design team, but it is a common thing that's said in Magic. I think it's generally accepted that when you read a card, you should be able to understand what the card does. According to the sort of idea of lenticular design and board complexity and the complexity of cards in general, you should be able to pretty much understand the rules of the games by the text on the card. One of the issues I noticed was that cases don't really match the rule set. The rule text on cases doesn't match the rule set. So if we go to a how do I look at my set collection? If we go and search for a case, you'll see that what the text says doesn't quite match what the rule set says or how the card works. So first we have a case of the Filched Falcon. When this case enters the battlefield, investigate. That's easy enough. All right, to solve, double dash, you control, or long dash, you control 3 or more artifacts. If unsolved, solve at the beginning of your end step. And then solved, sacrifice this, pay 3, sacrifice this case before do the thing. So there is this reminder text here that says if unsolved, solve at the beginning of your end step. And I guess that gives somewhat of an idea of how this case is going to be solved. But the issue is that it says to solve, you control 3 or more artifacts. Now, I think to most players, right, and again, this is a complaint that I've heard and read all over the internet, is that some of these cards are hard to understand. You control 3 or more artifacts. Now, what that most players' interaction with the game are going to be one where, like, when you meet a certain condition, that condition is checked the next time the game state is updated, right? So that would be once you've played your 3rd artifact, before triggers go onto the stack, game state is updated, and then this case is solved. Right, and I realize it says if unsolved, solve at the beginning of your unstep, but maybe that is unnecessary, right? Again, I'm not trying to design cards for anyone, but it does add a layer of complexity, and it can be confusing, right? Like that if unsolved, solve at the beginning of your end step means like, okay, if there's some state in the game where I've solved it, but something's preventing from it being solved, then it will be updated at the beginning of the end step. Rather than just how this card works is that the card becomes solved at the beginning of the end step. You see what I mean? There's it's like not the text is not like logically complete, and in fact, I think it's the design of the mechanic is not. It's not. It doesn't exist in a simplified enough design space. It's complex and it's confusing. All right. So the next thing, disguise. So yeah, let's bring up a disguise card. I didn't want this to be that long, and I am rambling. Okay, so disguise. You may cast this card face down for 3 as a 2/2 creature with ward 2. Turn it face up anytime for its disguise cost. All right, so hidden information, big part of Magic. No real complaints with the hidden information part. But the ward 2 adds a layer of complexity. And I realize that's probably a necessity for, but basically these are morphs. For morphs in Magic these days, 3/3 or 2/2 for 3 mana is probably not good enough in most sets. And so the ward 2 would be an improvement on that 2/2 creature for 3. But part of the issue with the complexity here is just there's a bunch of like hidden rules to morphs, right? Or in this case, disguised creatures, where like there's like game timing on transforming a morph or flipping a morph. A lot of players don't understand that that is a effect that is updated at the next time the game state is checked. They might think that it happens at instant speed, which I think a lot of players do from what I've read. A lot of new returning players who haven't interacted with morphs before. I think morphs were confusing enough when they were first introduced. Now that new players who haven't played morph are seeing morph for the first time in this disguise mechanic, I think they're as confused and frustrated by it as people were the initial time, despite it being fun for a lot of players as well. So just inherently, I think that this mechanic is confusing. The other issue is like if we search can't be countered in this set, can't be countered. Be countered? Oh, I didn't spell countered right. That's what it was. All right. So we have out cold is a perfect example, right? So we printed ward 2 on morphs, but then printed uncounterable spells with the text, this spell can't be countered, an instance no less. All right, so this is going to frustrate a lot of players when they see we have this set, we've improved morphs, and they're safe. I can play it on turn 3, on the draw, on the play, and they're safe for 2 turns on the play, 1 turn on the draw, right? My creature that I played for 3 mana, right? And oftentimes players, especially newer returning players, are waiting till turn 3 to play their first creature, right? But then turn 4 rolls around and that creature isn't protected anymore. And maybe it happens while you're making your attack and you want to flip your favorite creature that you just played, your one card. You waited until turn 3 to play, and your opponent casts this, and ward doesn't mean anything, right? So yeah, I guess after playing the set for a while, we know that this is a possibility, but again, it's hidden information. It happens at instant speed, and the opponent didn't even have to pay for ward to get the effect of the card. I just don't quite understand why print ward and then a bunch of this spell can't be countered at common. It seems like a recipe for frustrating, especially newer players. Okay, so that's that critique, and then The last thing I wanted to talk about under the design space, reading the card explains the card. Actually, there's two more points. Disguise versus cloak. What can I say? It's basically the same thing. I remember there being... I cannot remember what it's called right now, but where you could essentially cloak the top card of your deck in the cons block. It was like divinate or something. Anyway, I remember that being a thing. It was confusing then. It's confusing now. They're basically the same mechanic, but they're not the same mechanic. Players are frustrated that, again, from what I've read around the internet, that they've put 4 removal spells in their limited deck, and they cloak their out cold, their last out cold, and then they just can't cast it. It's frustrating. It's not fun. Okay. Spells that check CMC and morphs. All right. So, yeah. I understand how that works. A lot of players, new and returning players, do not. So they may just not cast that spell. If they have a long goodbye, they're trying to cast it on a morph. They don't know what CMC the morph is, because they don't know how that works, because nothing on the card explains it. Anyone who's played Magic for a while understands what's going on. A new player, a returning player who's never that enfranchised, has no idea. This card will probably just end up rotting in their hand, and they'll be confused and frustrated. Why is this spell uncommon? It seemed good. I don't understand. I don't feel comfortable casting it. Sort of the thought process I think new players are going through. Yeah, it's just not fun. Okay. Side note on Mark Rosewater's lenticular design. I think it is a great analysis of the Magic the Gathering design space. I don't think there has been a better analysis since that I am aware of. Super cool. I think it should be used more, expanded upon, and understood in a more deeper way. I think it was quite an insight. So yeah. All right, so let's move on to the next major point here. The story. Yeah. So another thing I've seen, and I'm not like a big Vorthos, but I get why people are, and I was in the past when I was younger. I tend to just these days just enjoy the game side of things. But every now and then the story captivates me, it captures me, and I get interested in it again. I have that. It's part of my personality, part of who I am. This story, not at all. Do not care. Did not capture me. It's silly, and I think that's fun. But yeah, from what I've so I'm not really like too critical on this point. Like, the story can kind of go wherever, and I'm fine. But from what I've read around the internet, it just doesn't make sense. And I tend to agree. Like, a murder mystery on Ravnica is not really, doesn't feel very like Ravnica as far as like Ravnica aesthetic and design space. It's Ravnica was always kind of a like, murder was happening anyway. Like, it was always like, the guilds are sort of fighting with each other, and so like, why now is everyone like hyper concerned with the guild feuds and assassinations or whatever that are happening? It just kind of doesn't really, like, the stakes and everything in the story just kind of don't make sense. A murder mystery on Ravnica. I'm not sure where that came from, which leads into the next point, the aesthetic. All right, the aesthetic. Yeah, like, I don't think a lot of people are really into like the Sphinxes and detective caps thing. And just that thing in general. it feels a little tagged on. Um, and where did all the detectives come from anyway? Like, again, we've been to Ravnica before many times, and we've never really seen like this detective guild, or like this, like, we've never really been introduced to the the Selesnya Yard, or whatever you want to call it. Like, it's just never really been a thing on Ravnica, and so yeah, it ends up feeling a little bit ad hoc and like just not that interesting, not that fun. All right, let's wrap this up. So just as a quick recap, the criticisms were there's a high board complexity at common. This is by Mark Rosewater's own admission, not necessarily a good thing for Magic. And it's not just that it's a high board complexity at common, it's that there is a lack of attention paid to the complexity required of, or lack of complexity level required of new and returning players. There's a low variance, or lowered variance, due to clues, which we didn't even touch clues, but we'll touch on them real quick. There's a low variance due to clues. Clues draw you a card. They get you the cards you need. They reduce the variance because you're drawing more of your deck. So what's the issue? The issue is that creates a perfect storm for enfranchised players, but it's a disaster for new and returning players. The high board complexity, low variance is a great way for people who know Magic really well to do battle. It can be fun, and it can be challenging. It can provide a challenge to players who have been playing for a long time. But overall, I think that the high board complexity, low variance, combined with mechanics that tend to eat each other's resources, creates a limited format that is actually not that interesting to enfranchised players, because I have seen complaints from them as well. Now, there are people who do like the set. There are enfranchised players who do like the set and find that the conditions are great for competitive, for ranking up on the ladder in Arena, for instance. However, I do see complaints from enfranchised players that it's grindy. And the reason why it feels so grindy, I think, is that low variance and high complexity, as well as it being generally a slower format, as we're casting morphs on turn 3 and then, turning them face up on turn 4, 5, 6. And that's when the game really starts to develop in board state and complexity. So yeah, overall, high complexity, low variance due to clues, mechanics that eat each other's resources, a story that is not great for a lot of people, and an aesthetic also that is somewhat feels somewhat contrived. So I think that's what most people are having issues with, honestly. I'm having issues with a lot of the same things, especially board complexity just kind of making me feel tired, a bit worn down after I play limited. Some fun cards were added to standard, I will say that. But other than that, yeah, limited is a bit tiresome. It's wearing me down. And yeah, that's my review of Karlov Manor. Murder at Karlov Manor. And again, I want to express to anyone who listens to this that I'm not, I don't want anyone to go after designers or, workers at Wizards of the Coast. It's just sort of trying to filter through the sensationalism and just throw out the points and be pretty factual, trying to be logical about why I think people are upset with this set. All right, well, if you watched till the end, thanks for watching. And I will get that limited video out today. It might be the last time I play Markov Manor Limited. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to make up my mind. But I'm definitely doing at least one more, I think, draft for Markov Manor. All right, until then.